Hey, what's up? This video is going to be a quick little track breakdown of my entry for Machinedrum's Compo 3, which ended up winning first place. First of all, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. We're just getting things started here on YouTube. I don't really have much going on yet. I'm a lot more active on my Instagram. If you want to go hop over there, you'll see a lot more educational content and things of that nature. Without further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to first show you an overview of my session here. I have 3 groups. The fourth one, demo, you can ignore for now because I just have a few of my resampling chains in there that I'll walk through in a bit. But the important ones are the drums, the tonal elements, and the effects and fills. I try to usually keep my projects sorted into these general categories. The drums usually contains one channel that is just the kick, and then one group of everything except the kick. And then tonal elements is pretty much self-explanatory. That's anything with a pitch or something that contributes to the tonal nature of the song. So that's like harmonic elements, melodic elements, anything that can be tuned, basically. And then effects and fills are things that fall into the categories of like risers, sound effects, fills, things that just kind of like give it that little extra ear candy element. And then occasionally I'll have a separate stack that's just for the kick and the bass during mixing, because sometimes I become a huge perfectionist about dialing in the phase of my sub and my kick, but I didn't have time to do that on this one, so we've just got these 3 categories right here. So yeah, let's take a look at each section here and see what I've got going on. Some of these sounds were achieved through heavy resampling, so I may not be able to give a 100% accurate account of everything that went into designing every single sound. However, I will do my absolute best. So let's get into it. The kick drum. That's what the kick sounds like in my track. I actually did use the original kick sample that we were given, which sounds like this. However, I didn't actually use the whole sample. I just used one single cycle of the waveform because it was almost a perfect sine wave, as you can see right there. So I just found a looping segment of that, set it to loop in this mode where it shows 2 forward arrows. That basically means it's going to play the sample once and then it's going to loop it, play it again and again and again and so on. And then I took the pitch envelope, I set it to begin at 48 semitones above the center line, and then I gave it a pretty short decay, a pretty short release, and just kind of kept the sustain around the middle there. Then on the filter, I set the filter down pretty low and then used the filter envelope to have that filter open up really quickly on the attack of each note and then drop back down pretty quickly. And then it's running through a saturator just to add some beef and clipping. I clip the hell out of pretty much everything these days. It's just where my sound's headed, I guess. Percussion. So now the percussion group includes everything except the kick. So when you play it all together, it sounds like this. So this sound that I called the bit snare is actually just really short, tiny micro samples of the snare clap sound that we were given. That sound. I just took really small segments of that, ran it through a grain delay, some OTT, Valhalla Room reverb, saturator, and an EQ. I really like to use Valhalla Room on these like absurdly short reverbs, but then set the mix to 100% wet. It's kind of like what you do with Serum's hyper dimension effect, but I don't know, I feel like it sounds a little smoother, but also punchier at the same time. So here it is without, and then with. I don't know, it's just, I love the kind of sound design you can do with Valhalla Room. It's just so much fun. So that's that sound. This one right here is some hi-hats. Yeah, so the way I actually achieved this sound, this was achieved by resampling. So let me show you real quick. Yeah, so I took the kick drum sample in its entirety, put a really steep pitch envelope on it, and then didn't really do much else. Yeah, no, not much else. Just a pitch envelope. And then I ran it through my trusty Valhalla Room reverb, some erosion, some saturation, a little bit of mid-side EQ to kind of boost the low mids on the mono information, and then on the sides to cut some of those lows out and boost the highs. Then I ran it through OTT, and then I resampled that, loaded it into this channel right here, then did a pretty intense EQ cutting out most of the lows and then saturating it even further. Then I just chopped it up to make a little hi-hat pattern, and that was that. Then I've got an additional track of hats here. This one was a little more intentional because when I was doing this one, I was really just in the sound design phase messing around. And this track here, I took the original hi-hat sample, I clipped some of the beginning off of it just to get that really sharp transient, and then I ran it through a vocoder. Now the reason I ran it through a vocoder is because you can use noise as the carrier, then you can set the release time of those vocoder bands. So I automate that over time so that as the track builds, those hi-hats get longer and longer. So they start out here, then as the track grows, they get longer and longer, and then they cut off again. So that vocoder is handling the bulk of the envelope of the hi-hat. And then there's some tonal shaping with erosion, saturation. I have this thing called a reverb tail machine that I'll probably talk about in a bit. Basically, I just use it to make little like reverb throws because I like to let certain things into the reverb, then have that reverb hold out and then grow and then cut off immediately. But there's some better sonic examples of that on some other parts. So I'll talk about that in a bit. Let's see, the snare. Yeah, this snare sound was going on in the second part of the track. It's literally just the original sample, cut pretty short with a fade out on it, and then I loaded up Mr. Bill's slap plugin. I only used the clap module and the clip module. The clap module basically just puts like a tiny little wash of white noise in the back, and then you can set the length and the timbre of that. So here it is without, and then here it is with. It's subtle, but it's there. It gives it kind of like a nice snappy quality without sounding too dry. And now let's talk about the spectral percussion. So here's what that sound sounds like. So this sound is a little bit more involved. I took the original kick drum sample that we were given, but I looped a single cycle of the waveform, but I kept the attack in the sound. So we get that first kick drum attack, and then it loops a single cycle of the waveform here. And then what I did was I gave it a really steep pitch envelope here in the beginning, and then I gave it a really sharp volume envelope, so now it's really punchy. And then there's this device called Proby. It's free, highly recommend it. You can have it spit out random values every time you trigger a MIDI note, and then just attach that random value to whatever parameter you want. So I attached it to the pitch envelope amount. So that gives our percussive sound some slight variation each time. And then I ran it through a saturator, an EQ, and then an echo. And then the star of the show here is Unfiltered Audio's Spec Ops. Now, I love this plugin. I think it's great. It does a lot of these really cool spectral operations. You get a ton to choose from. But the one I used in this sound was the glitchy freeze effect. So if we hear it without the effect, it sounds like this. But as we turn up the glitchy freeze, you'll start to hear what it's doing. We can max it out and have it completely freeze the sound. So I used that and automated that amount of that glitchy freeze effect as the track progresses so that by the end of the track it completely freezes. And then there's some EQ here just to fade in the sound, just like that. Really steep high pass filter. And this is what it sounds like. So the whole drums group together sounds like this in the first part of the track. And then in the second part of the track, it sounds like this. Okay, now let's take a look at the tonal elements of the track. I hope my face isn't covering up any of these things as I'm trying to explain, because I'm not really paying attention to my OBS feed here. Okay. So let's take a look at these tonal elements. This sound here is actually the result of manipulating the NASCAR sample, because we were given literally just NASCAR sounds. Love it. So I just found a really short segment of the NASCAR sample and then looped it, did some pretty intense filtering on it with a pretty steep filter envelope to give it like a percussive feel. And then I ran it through my favorite Valhalla Room reverb, and then the disperser by Kilohertz, and then saturator. I don't think it's not even clipping through the saturator, that just turns it way up because it's such a quiet sample. And then it's running through some really short delay, just like 1/16th note with a pretty low feedback amount. And then again, my reverb tail machine. Now this is the sound I can actually pretty clearly explain it on. So I have an audio effect rack with two parallel chains running. One is a dry chain. That's just the dry signal running straight through. And then the other one is the wet chain, and it also includes a utility. So the whole audio effect rack actually kind of acts like a send and return, but instead of using the Ableton sends here, we just use this utility as the send amount. So you'll notice that most of the time, the utility is completely down at -infinity. So it's not actually letting any sound go into the reverb. And then when we trigger the note that I want to send into the reverb tail machine, we turn up the gain on this utility. It goes into an EQ so we can shape the tone before it hits the reverb, and then it hits the actual reverb. And then the actual volume of the reverb chain is normally all the way down, and then for the reverb throws, just like this, let me solo it so you can hear it even clearer. Every time the note gets triggered, utility lets it through, goes into the EQ, into the reverb, and then the whole chain, we just automate like a really quick rise and then cut. So Mr. Bill called this violating space. It's when you simulate a space with a reverb, and then you do something that that simulated space typically would not do in real life. So in this case, what we're doing is taking a reverb tail of a simulated space and then just cutting it off. So the note goes into the reverb, we got a swell, and then it cuts off. So I do that a few times in a few different ways on this track, but that was a really clear example that I can demonstrate it with. Let's see, NASCAR 2. Yeah, so this sound is the same exact NASCAR sample as the previous sound, but I changed the envelope settings so that it's more of like a sustained tone instead of a percussive sound. Still running through disperser, saturator. I took the echo off. I took the Valhalla reverb off. And then it's also running through this Lifeline console thing, which is basically just like a channel strip kind of deal. It's not doing much, but I do like it. I do like what it does. So yeah, I just played some chords. Pretty simple. NASCAR 3, this sound is actually NASCAR 3 and 4 here. These are both resampled recordings of these first two NASCAR patches. So I'm pretty sure, actually, they might just both be the first one. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, just a little note sampled. And then this NASCAR 4, that's definitely the first patch. And then again, I use the reverb tail machine to do some reverb throws. And then there's a auto filter that's slowly opening, but other than that, it's like pretty self-explanatory sound, I think. And then this one, this kick sign sound actually ended up being one of my favorite sounds in the whole track, and I'll explain why in just a sec. But how I made this one is I took that same kick single cycle sine wave and just looped it, added some slight pitch modulation with an LFO, pretty long release just to give it like a nice keyboard quality. And yeah, it's running through a Valhalla room reverb with a longer reverb than I've been using. And then it's being sidechained against the kick. But the thing that worked so well about this sound was actually that when you're working with single cycle waveforms like this, you have to make sure that they're tuned exactly to the track you're working in, because usually if you just loop a single cycle, chances are it's not going to fall in line with equal temperament. So what I did here is I just kind of like, I was working so fast that I just tuned it about to like what I thought sounded right. But then after I actually wrote the part and just stuck it in, I realized it was a little bit out of tune. And with the whole track, it actually gives it this really nice like Aphex Twin kind of microtonal quality, just ever so slightly. And I feel like that's one of the things that like really took this track to the next level. And it was just kind of a happy accident. So here's what that sounds like in context. Yeah. So I really like that sound. I think it's one of my favorite sounds in a track, and I think it's pretty simple for a favorite sound. There's not really a whole lot going on there. It's just basically a sine wave into some reverb, but the little bits of imperfection introduced by the method of looping a single cycle waveform, they make it sound like more than just a sine wave. So I think that's pretty cool. Last but not least in the tonal section is the bass sound that comes in the second half of the track. This is what it sounds like. And this sound is pretty simple as well. I used the kick again. I use the kick a lot in this track. I kept the attack and then I looped a single cycle the waveform, had the pitch envelope pretty high. I just kind of like had that going as a starting point, and I ended up using a bunch of different instances of this sampler with that patch already set up. So I have that going, and then I run it through the Valhalla room, and then erosion, saturation, some mid-side EQ again, OTT, and then sidechained it to the kick. And this is what it sounds like in context. I also automate the erosion amount and the drive amount of the saturator as time goes on to get those like swells, just to give it some movement. Let's move on to the effects and fills section. So that first sound, it is, let's see if I turn these effects off. Yeah, so that sound actually is a reversed recording of one of these effect chains that I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty sure it's just the hi-hat running through this metallic kind of sounding one that I made. Yeah, so it's just that, but like played in reverse and then with some reverb on it and some unfiltered audio spec ops. Yeah, but the effect I'm using on this instance of Spec Ops is one called MP3ify, and it basically just lets you introduce MP3 artifacts into your sound for sound design purposes. This next one is, I'm pretty sure, the exact same sound. Yeah, I just kind of like time stretched the hell out of it and then added more reverb and then some soothe to take down some of the harshness of it. Yeah, same source, still came from the hi-hat sound. I just basically reversed it, had it fade in over time, and then sidechained it to the kick. Yeah. The metallic, let's see what these are. Oh yeah, again, same sample source as before, just the hi-hat running through that effect chain and resampled and manipulated. And then let's see, bit effects. Oh yeah, this is actually just the NASCAR sample run through Spec Ops and resampled. I don't have the original Spec Ops chain though, so you'll just have to take my word for it. And then bit effects verb, that's literally just the same sample on the bit effects channel, but with time stretched and added reverb. Yeah. And then this one, I was running out of ideas at this point. Literally just took the NASCAR sound, time stretched it, and faded it in for a little build, and then same thing there. And that pretty much wraps it up. So let's go ahead and listen to the full track.